when I used to have a haircut that looked like a haircut?
Or I'm wearing a hat.
Yeah. But George, I'm impressed, cut his own hair, but I am not there yet. I did that once when I was about 2, and I'm still trying to fix that. Look at that. That is awesome, George. So I'd like to welcome you, and micro-credentials are a great way to ensure that your professional development energies are directed at tasks that are important for you in your career. I'd also like to thank George with his wonderful haircut, our communications coordinator for his assistance this afternoon. While I've been to lots of Zoom meetings in the past 2 months, this is the first time I've used a platform for a webinar. So all the slideshow and the documents to which I'm referring today are posted on the NEA website. So feel free to download them and use them in any way that helps you in your work. And I want to start actually taking a quick bird walk and giving you a reminder, even though we're close to the end of school and some of you have finished, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to remind you about the Scott McGilvery Children's Fund. Just because we're engaging in remote instruction during the pandemic and school's ending doesn't mean that the students' needs will be ending. Sorry about that. As a member of NEA New Hampshire, you have access to the Scott McGilvery Children's Fund, which supports you in supporting students in New Hampshire. So most recently, we've provided help to students with family members who've lost their jobs, and as a result, the children didn't have enough food. So if you go to that link up on the right, where it says Scott McGilvery Children's Fund New Hampshire, SMCF-NH, it'll take you to the page that's shown on the left, and you can apply for a grant where it's that lower left-hand corner. Grant's probably a little serious a word, like assistance is probably a better one. There's an online form that only takes a couple minutes to complete, and we process those funds very, very quickly, usually within 48 hours. George is on the board, as am I. So if you're aware of a school child in New Hampshire needing assistance, please remember that you have this resource to use to help them. So here's where we're headed in the next hour or so. I want to take you a little bit through the ESP Professional Growth Continuum. If you were on Megan's Tuttle Talk last night, this is what she was referring to along with Becky Pringle. And I want to take you through that because many of the NEA Micro Credentials are based on that. I want to introduce you to those micro credentials, although some people like Diane, who's on the line, has already completed a couple, and then just make you aware of future NEA New Hampshire professional development. So using the chat function, so if you hover over the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function. So what I'd like you to do is use that chat function to list what are the most challenging aspects of your current role. And again, this will not be anonymous because people know who's typing in. But if you use that chat function, what's most challenging right now in your current role? Give you a couple minutes to find that chat link and type in, and George and I are monitoring those. I got one which says technology. And not working with the kids. Unfortunately, there isn't a micro credential for that, but we do miss that. Supporting special education children and not working one-on-one. Yes, not meeting deadlines or trying to meet deadlines while I'm waiting for someone else to complete their work. Students not showing up for meets and then we worry about where they are. Again, technology. And everything's changing. I'm not sure what will be happening in the future. How do we keep kids engaged in a classroom environment? I think that's remotely. Students who are absent from the groups, students who don't show up to Zoom, their parent yells at them during Zoom. They do not do schoolwork in between Zooms, people, places, and things I can't control. Not having a role because I work in the library. I can see, Cynthia, that would be very tough. And even though I'm working with a few students online, I miss working on the vocational skills with my students, and it's difficult reaching a non-verbal student via his Chromebook. So there are some of the things like technology that micro-credentials will be able to help you with, but some of the other ones, in terms of not being able to work one-on-one with students, while the micro-credentials can't help you with that, next Tuesday night's Tuttle Talk is going to be looking at your emotional support. And I also want to share a resource at the end that we'll be sharing in the summer around your resilience and emotional support. So this workshop today is part of NEA New Hampshire's Educate and Elevate campaign. And on the screen there, you'll see the link at the bottom. That's to NEA's website. And we really felt strongly that educational support professionals who keep school running and students healthy and ready to learn don't get the support that they need and that they deserve. So we have a campaign going on to make sure that you get the support as an ESP you need and the recognition to help you with contracts. So we're going to be focusing on that for the next year. And I just noticed, George, there's a typo in professionals. We need to fix that.
And you win the prize.
What?
And you win the prize. You found it. Very good.
Yes, thanks. I've looked at that for a week doing these slides. I was like, wow. So I'd like to talk about this professional growth continuum. As NEA New Hampshire Vice President Becky Pringle mentioned during the phone call last night, NEA has developed a professional growth continuum for educational support professionals, or ESPs. The continuum articulates the possible professional growth objectives for each of the ESP families. And the ESP families are like clerical services, work in the office, custodial and maintenance services, food services like Wendy, health and student services, paraprofessionals, paraeducators, security services, skilled trade, technical services, and transportation services. So what NEA did was thought, what are the kinds of things in which all ESPs need to engage? And they came up with the following 8 areas, and these are called the universal standards. One is communication, that no matter what you do as an ESP or a teacher or a superintendent, you need to have the ability to effectively listen and communicate, both written and verbal form, with a diverse audience, including students, parents, guardians, staff members, visitors, and the community. You also need to be culturally competent. You need to be able to examine your own cultural context, understand the cultural context of others, interact across cultural contexts with sensitivity to differences in terms of economic differences, race differences, gender and disability differences. You also need to be organized. The ability to prioritize, plan, and execute tasks efficiently and effectively. And for those of us who work in schools, you are a mandated reporter. So you need to understand the responsibilities of a mandated reporter who suspects possible abuse or neglect of a child, and what, when, how, and to whom those reports should be filed. An ethics standard. You need to have the ability to maintain a high level of ethical behavior, confidentiality, and privacy of any information regarding students, staff, and all job-related matters. You need to have a sense of health and safety. You need to have the ability to protect the health and safety of yourself and others by knowing and executing health, safety, and emergency protocols and procedures with fidelity. And I think this is going to be particularly important as schools reopen and we learn how do we keep ourselves and students and other faculty members and staff safe with the COVID-19 virus out there. The technology standard that a couple of you alluded to in your comments, how do you use electronic devices to problem solve and complete work-related duties? And finally, 8, that sense of professionalism, the ability to present and conduct yourself in a professional manner in all job settings. So this professional growth continuum takes all those ESP families and articulates for each of those standards, how might you grow in each one of those areas? So there are 3 different levels to this professional growth continuum model. When you enter into your profession or your role, it's those foundational skills. So what do you need to know when you enter your position in order just to be able to do it? And then as you gain experience and more professional development, you become proficient. So that you have a real sense of professional competence, not just how do you enter the profession, but how do you get really good at your job? And then finally, when you've got advanced or mastery of your job, you have the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that you have to exhibit for demonstrating mastery. And when it actually was in Merrimack Valley a couple of years ago in June, we were talking about this, and someone really said, gee, I think I'm advanced, I've reached the mastery part. Then we talked about the pathway opportunities. It could be that if you are at that point in your career, that you are a role model for others. So people might say, if you want to see how a job is done well in food service, watch what Wendy does. Or if you want to see someone work well with kids, watch what Gail does. Or it could be if you've reached advanced mastery that now you're looking at mentoring those who are just starting and building those foundational skills. And I know many of you know Julie Dwaren, who's on the board and is an ESP in Northwood. She actually started a mentoring program for ESPs. So they have advanced and mastery level people helping those new ESPs who are building those foundational skills. Or you could be a leader and advance the profession and your learning environment by leading or collaborating with others in those skills. So this, on our website, it actually has the document. And so if you're interested in exploring this further, but this is what one looks like for paraprofessionals. So in that organization standard, you need to have the ability to prioritize, plan, and execute tasks efficiently and effectively. So if you are just starting, you need to follow procedures. You need to manage your work duties effectively, given the time. You need to follow directions. As you get more proficient at those, you need to maintain ready access to information, model efficient and effective workload management, work cooperatively with other staff and perform maintenance tasks. And then when you get advanced, then you can use those management tools, analyze practices and say, you know, it would be better if we did it this way. Or you can manage or lead and mentor and coach others. So this is the example just for paraprofessionals. For each of the ESP families, there's a similar chart with these kinds of things broken out for what you might consider for professional learning. There's also, to help you with this, an ESP Professional Growth Continuum Self-Assessment Guide. And this is my big, can he switch and do this? Yes. Can you see that okay? Thank you, Gail. So this is what the 6-page guide looks like. So it's just a template that talks about what is your ESP career family? Are you clerical, paraeducator, health and student services, food services? What's your current work site? And then to familiarize yourself with the standards, like what is it that you want to grow in? Where do you feel like your current level of practice is? Are you at that foundational level, just learning the skills? Do you feel like you're pretty proficient? Or do you feel you're advanced and have a sense of mastery? And why do you think that? What's your growth plan? What's your goal? What do you really want to become better at in your job? While we get better at our jobs, it's my belief in education, I guess because I'm an educator, that there's always room to grow and become better, even if it's helping others to become better at the things that we value. And then What steps would you take to work toward your growth goal? What professional learning are you currently engaged in? Is it independent learning? Or are you working with colleagues? Conducting, after you do your self-assessment, is there a standard in which you want to work? What's the new level of practice toward which you want to work? And then there are some prompts to think about listing what are the new levels of practice that you want to reach. So there is this growth continuum, which lists 8 standards that are universal standards no matter which role you're in as an ESP. There are these things that you need to improve and gather your skill and help others to gather skill. And you have the foundational level, you become proficient, and then there's advanced and mastery. This is what it looks like, and the document is on our website. It's also on NEA's website. Then there are tools like this self-assessment guide that help you figure out where am I and in what areas might I like to grow. So use the chat function to write any questions or comments about that ESP professional growth continuum before we move on to micro credentials. Not see any questions or comments about this. Are people familiar with it from the workshop a couple years ago? Or does it seem like this might be helpful? Is it overload? What are your thoughts? Well, no comments. So I've either done such a great job of explaining it or totally confused you. So why don't we move on to micro credentials. Micro credentials are pretty cool because if you said to educators, what are the top 150 areas or so in which we want to improve, and had educators develop them, and then gathered free materials that were available if you have internet access, that you could look at videos and you could look at documents and you could go to websites online in order to learn and demonstrate mastery. And if you're an NEA member, you can earn micro credentials. There's no additional cost to you or your schools. And what I'd like to do is share this short video of micro credentials and then ask you if you have any questions. I'm going into detail, a lot more detail, but I want to see if you have any questions after watching this video.
For educators, professional learning is essential to what we do. Micro-credentials are increasingly becoming a part of how we do that.
Micro-credentials are a digital recognition educators can earn for acquiring specific skills or knowledge. The National Education Association offers micro-credentials to all educators, teachers, and education support professionals, members and non-members. This online professional learning resource helps improve classroom skills and supports student success. With more than 150 topics, NEA has the largest library of micro-credentials designed for educators by educators.
We have some school districts that are not offering PD really at all to their teachers outside of an in-service. We already have a teacher shortage in South Dakota, and we really can't afford to drive more people away from the profession just because they don't have the support they need. Having NEA step up and do this right now has just been a lifesaver to us. With micro-credentials, we are empowering our members to take charge of their own professional development. Educators choose a skill they have developed over their career or a new skill they want to learn.
complete required tasks, and then submit evidence to demonstrate that they've mastered that skill.
Every micro-credential has a certain requirement or requirements. We score them based on those requirements, based on the rubric that we're given.
For example, you may do a video to show that you know how to assess students properly through formative assessments.
Many of the educators that are assessing the micro-credentials and many of the educators who have written the micro-credentials are national board certified teachers. So that in and of itself speaks volumes.
When educators successfully complete their requirements, they receive a digital badge that verifies their expertise.
There's a wide variety of micro-credentials that seem to fit whether you were a veteran educator of 25 years or someone just new to the profession.
In our local, we brought together educators who were interested in micro-credentialing.
In Rapid City, South Dakota, members formed a professional learning community, or PLC, to pursue micro-credentials together.
And so the advantage of working in the professional learning community is just having somebody there to help you and knowing that you're going through it together and that you're able to have that support and you can bounce ideas off of each other.
As a group, the majority of us decided to do the trauma-informed pedagogy.
In a PLC, educators can learn a new skill, then use the micro-credential to demonstrate what they've learned.
The trauma-informed instruction has become a hot topic in this state for a number of reasons. The number of drug overdoses has skyrocketed in the state, and teachers are describing to us behaviors that they just haven't encountered before.
It has made me more aware of some of my students and knowing that they do have this trauma and ways to help each individual student along the way.
Just this year, we got a little charm in my room that's very sensitive. He's been through trauma since the age of a year and a half. And so the credential came at a perfect time for me because I was then able to find those resources I needed, look up how I could handle him in certain situations, and develop an overall plan that was beneficial to him and to me.
One of the most powerful comments that I've heard from those that have participated is the fact that this was relevant. I could take it the very next day and use it in my classroom. That to me is the highest praise you can give any kind of professional learning.
Start earning your micro-credential today.
So, what questions do you have about micro-credentials? And use the chat function to type any questions you have based on what you know now and what you've seen in that video. I'll give you a couple minutes to write any questions. And George, I'm quitting as a proofreader looking at my spelling of micro-credentials.
You know, it looks okay.
Got a stutter.
Yep.
I see one question from Michelle. Micro-credentials are free. If you're a member, then there's no additional charge, and this could help toward your para-educator certification if you use the portfolio process for Para 2. Gail, good question. For the Para 2 certification, there is a portfolio process that I can take people through. This isn't the focus of that today, but the micro-credentials would help you get Para 2 certification. And Kim, yes, there is one we can look for you on reading comprehension. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to drill down a little bit further and show you walking you through a micro-credential and what it looks like. So as the video alluded to, micro-credentials help to ensure that professional learning addresses educators' needs for helping students and your own professional learning goals. Too often, in-service isn't well thought out, I think, particularly for ESPs. And like, oh, you sit in the back and learn something that is not relevant to your job or what you feel you need to do for kids. For example, Kim wanting to work on reading comprehension, if that's what she needs, then she should have professional learning geared toward reading comprehension, because that's the need that she has. I liken that to a pearl is made in an oyster when something like a grain of sand irritates the oyster, and the oyster surrounds that grain of sand or that irritant with a pearl, with the calcium deposits that make a pearl. In the same way, if Kim really feels that she needs to have better reading comprehension, that's kind of the irritant or her need to know, which could help her to complete a micro-credential that would help her help that student. So it also encourages collaboration among educators. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. You can do it by yourself, but you can also work on the same micro-credential with others, or you could work on individual micro-credentials as a group and touch base periodically to support each other in your learning. So when you go to this website, NEA Micro Credentials, and again, this is posted on our website, or you can just Google it. You come to this from the Center for Great Public Schools. There are 3 columns. On the left-hand column is a Get Started, Create Your Account Now. In the middle column is Browse Our Micro-Credentials Library. And on the right-hand side, after you've earned micro-credentials, that's where you manage them, print out certificates, and keep track of that professional learning. So let's pretend that we're clicking that blue button, Getting Started. So when you click that on the left-hand side, it brings you to 2 things. You can either get started, and it's getting started as simple as that left-hand image where you say your email, a password, confirm it, your first name and your last name, and click sign up. You're already a member. No one takes there's no credit card, there's no fee. You're in the system by completing those 5 boxes. If you've already signed up, then you get the box on the right where you just put in whatever your username was and then the password, and then you sign up and sign in, and then you're inside the system looking at the micro-credentials that you've earned or the ones that you might want to earn. So if we have an account, or if we don't but just want to look at the micro-credentials, we click on that orange box in the middle to browse the micro-credentials library. So the way that micro-credentials on the site are organized, they're organized in stacks. So you see those, 7 by 28 images. There are more than that, but that's all I could fit on this screen. Each one of those images, if you were to click on that stack, it would have inside of it between 3 and 18 micro-credentials related to the topic of the stack. So those are like large topics or general areas, and then in each of those areas there are other micro-credentials supporting that stack. Each micro-credential takes approximately 15 hours to complete between reading the materials and generating the work. And the handout that George sent everyone, pages 9 to 15, lists the stacks and the micro-credentials in each stack. So what I'd like to have you do, just to get a sense of what's there, and Kim, well, let me say one other thing first. If you go to that micro-credential library, you'll see on the slide where it says NEA Full Stack Library. That's what I was just showing you. Because of our current situation with COVID-19, they have pulled out the ones that are relevant for distance learning. So if someone felt I need to work at enhancing my skills to become better at helping with distance learning, there's a whole set of credentials around that in that set. if I need, since I can't see others or be with kids, I need a micro credential that I can do when I'm in quarantine or when I'm not with others. There's a whole set of stacks in that middle button. And on the right-hand stack, there's a micro credential library during COVID-19 for education support professionals. So what I'd like to have you do, if you downloaded the handouts, pages 9 to 15, or you can go to that NEA.certificationbank.com to explore the list of micro-credentials. So take a couple minutes to look through them, and then write 2 or 3 micro-credentials in which you might be interested in the chat box. And Kim, let's see if we can find you one on reading comprehension. You look for that, and I'll look for that. I'll give you 3 minutes to explore, and then we'll see what you found. About another minute and a half. About another 30 seconds. Okay, why don't you take a couple seconds and just in the chat room, write down 1 or 2 that you, or maybe 2 or 3 that you found that you might want to explore further. So some of the ones that we have here is technology integration for instructional coaches. We didn't see much there for clerical workers, addressing challenging behaviors, any and all trauma-based. Yes, Merrimack Valley is very well represented. Kim, I thought there was something in the ELL around reading comprehension, but I couldn't find that. So I'm going to have to ask.
I couldn't find it either.
But one of the great things about this program is that if there's something that we need, we can request it and they will develop it. So let's see. So again, Gail, all the trauma-based and bullying. So reason I had you do this, there are over 150 micro-credentials. So hopefully you found one that was of interest to you. But as I mentioned to Kim, the other thing that we can do, since these are developed by educators for educators, if there's something that you want, for example, looking at technology for clerical workers, then it could be that we request to have that one done, or they pay you to develop those to help others. And that's where that role, if you think back to the Continuum, comes in. You could actually help others by developing a micro-credential on how do you develop that skill around Google Docs or whatever it is that you need for clerical technology. So when you go into the stack, you will see the and I chose the one for communication standard, cultural standard. Word to the wise here, if you wanted to see what it actually looked like, the micro-credential, you go to where it says here, view the PDF. And don't click start, because then you've just registered for the micro-credential, which I've done twice. So just view the PDF to see what it is that the micro-credential would entail. So each micro-credential has a key method for learning, method components, all the supporting research, and it was important to NEA that any of the research or links that they put out there, they're all publicly available online. You don't need to pay any additional or pay $10 for this article. It's all free and publicly available. The resources are free and publicly available, and the submission guidelines and the evaluation criteria. So this is what the front page of a micro-credential looks like. And what I'd like to do is show you the whole micro-credential. So this is the Educational Support Professionals Organization Standard. So if you think back to that Continuum, this was the one where I showed you the chart. And the key method here is taking you through a 5-step inquiry learning cycle that'll help you demonstrate organization that connects you to your students and their communities. Then it tells you all the method components. And then there's an inquiry learning cycle where you need to know yourself, explore a challenge, establish a growth focus, plan and act, and then reflect. And then there are steps you need to know the organization standard, know yourself, set a growth goal. This is what it looks like, whole schools for whole students. There's a whole program around they need to be healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. And here's the link if you want more detail on this. The why is your passion and purpose. The what is the standards continuum. How, the whole student and you. You follow your organization growth plan, you reflect. And here is all the supporting research. You don't need to click on everything and read it, but if you thought, gee, why do we have this whole student model? What difference does it make for kids? Here's the supporting research. All this underneath resources, there are all kinds of resources from NEA and other places around meeting the needs of the whole student. Maslow's hierarchy, which is looking at the needs that students have. Self-reflection and professional growth planning. And then here are submission guidelines and evaluation criteria. And here I think it's important to say, you don't have to do these assignments and submit them. You can't get credit for a micro-credential if you don't do that. But if your district or for Para 2 certification, you just want to do the learning, you can do that. My feeling is if you're doing the learning, why not write a page or a page and a half about your goals and what you've done to get them in order to earn the micro-credential. Diane, do you want to weigh in since you've gotten 2 micro-credentials about that process? Oh, we may have lost her. She's actually has got.
Diane, she's
sorry.
muted. You have to unmute Diane. There you go.
Okay, I'm sorry. The more I'm listening to you talk, I don't think I'm on the right page with the micro credentials with you. I don't think I did that.
All right.
So I'm sorry.
Nope, not a problem. So, for example, looking at the part one, the overview questions, if you were deciding that you wanted to do this for micro credential, you would write pages, 250 words, so a page to maybe a page and a half. Please answer the following contextual questions to help our reviewer understand your current situation. Do not include any information that will make you or others identifiable. List your ESP career family, your position in the number of years. Describe your school's work site's level, healthy, safe, engaged, supported, or challenged, of meeting the needs of the whole student. Explain your choice with the type of specific detail found in the diagram. So you'd write a page about where you feel your school was in terms of supporting whole kids. And then you would provide some artifacts like your professional vision statement, why you do what you do, what your professional growth plan is, and the documentation that you'd submit with that. And then here's how your work is evaluated or assessed. So every micro-credential for each artifact also has a rubric that says this is what the reviewers, who are educators like you and me, this is what they're looking for, and then finally a reflection. So every micro-credential is laid out in the same way with a key method, the method components, things for reflecting, supporting research, resources, submission guidelines if you choose to go for a micro-credential, and then a final reflection. Those are evaluated, and if they determine that you meet the criteria, you're awarded that badge, that micro-credential. And if it's like, no, this needs to go back for extra work, you do the extra work. There's no charge for that. And I always like to point out the people who are evaluating these are like you and me. So they are in your corner, but we also have professional standards. Questions about that? You can either unmute or okay. So the completion options that you can, as I said, work on a micro-credential all by yourself. You can work independently at your own speed. You have 6 months after you start a micro-credential. When you register and click start instead of view PDF, you have 6 months to do the 15 hours of work if you choose to apply for a micro-credential. You can work with others on the same micro-credential. I know that Gail's done some work in Merrimack Valley around trauma-informed. That work, when you get together and you study trauma-informed, as a group, you could each support each other and individually earn your micro-credentials, or you could decide, I want to work on a micro-credential around technology, and Gail or Diane wanted to work on one on trauma-informed or restorative practices. So we could get together, chart our progress, support each other, but wouldn't have to do the same micro-credential. And also on our website, George has put up, there is like an 18-page facilitator's guide, which takes you through those different options, how you can set up a professional learning community to help each other go through those micro-credentials. So that's also on NEA New Hampshire's website. It's also on NEA's website. Reactions, questions to micro-credentials, and you can just unmute. And Michelle, I am seeing your question. It wasn't so much around micro-credentials, but now we're at this time of remote teaching. Are there places, sites that we can recommend to parents? I know some are at a loss to help our students. NEA New Hampshire is part of a group called the New Hampshire Learning Alliance. And George, can you Google that and then put in the chat box? It's a coalition of all the places in New Hampshire, like the superintendents, the principals, NEA New Hampshire. And it's a place where you can go for workshops and resources for educators as well as for parents. And then the other thing that that group is doing is coming up with like summer vacation plans. So here's something you could do in the morning if you're a parent and you can't get out with your kids. Here's a link to the Young Inventors website where you could come up with different uses for a spatula. So it's like day camp virtually for parents who aren't sure about what to do. And Phyllis had a question about, are we sure that the DOE accepts these toward Parapro? The Parapro is a test by ETS, so these wouldn't go toward the Parapro. These would be used for the portfolio section of Para 2 certification, and I can help you with that. And George in the chat room has listed all the resources from that New Hampshire Learning Alliance. Any other questions about micro credentials? Okay, if you do come up with a question later, and I do want to support Kim in finding out, getting something around reading comprehension, you can feel free to email me. My email address is on the website, and I would be glad to help you with any questions you have about micro credentials or anything else around professional development. Yes, April, there will be more added in the future, such as technology. One of the things that NEA wants to do is make sure they meet your needs. So if you say, I'm looking for something on creating a micro credential and creating a website, then we will find an educator who knows enough about that to pull together roughly a 15-hour experience that will help you learn technology that you want. So NEA is responsive. Like probably 5 months ago, there were 80 or 90, and they've done 60. So we keep adding them all the time. So again, if you have any questions or you think of something later that you want to know, you can find me on the website, Irv Richardson, Richardson at NEA-NH.org. And I do want to make you aware of a couple other things coming up through our Educate and Elevate workshops. On June 3rd, next Wednesday afternoon, there's going to be a webinar on using the Connect program for suicide prevention, and Ann Douglas from the National Alliance on Mental Illness New Hampshire is going to be presenting that. That's going to be from 3 to 5:15 instead of the 4:30-ish, because the new law requires all educators and some volunteers in schools to receive 2 hours of training in youth suicide prevention. And unless we do the 2 hours, we can't certify that you've had that. So on June 3rd, there's going to be suicide prevention by Ann Douglas. On June 10th, Nicole Argraves, Lori Hayes, and Michelle McCord, who are UNICEF directors, are going to lead a workshop on You Are Powerful for ESPs. A lot of things have changed for ESPs, and again, as part of our Educate and Elevate, we want to support you in the work and help you to organize. So we're doing that on June 10th. And if you register, you'll be sent materials for that. And Peter Miller, who's also a UNICEF director, on June 17th is going to be looking at wage theft, what it is and how to prevent it. That there are some people who lose up to $650 a year in wages because of job creep. So he's going to be sharing strategies for being aware of that. Some other upcoming NEA New Hampshire professional learning opportunities. From July 13th through the 17th, There's the Powerful Learning Conference with the New Hampshire Learning Initiative, and that's going to be virtual. August 3rd through the 7th, NEA New Hampshire's Summer Leadership Program. And that, I believe, we're planning virtual, but we're hoping to be able to go back face to face. Then August 17th through the 19th, we're doing a workshop, a 2-day workshop on creating resilience in educators. How do you take care of yourself? Too often we're the candles that light the way for others while consuming ourselves. So the 17th and 18th is a 2-day workshop done by a group called the Bright Morning Consulting Group. They've written the book Onward, and everybody who registers for that gets a book and a workbook. The 19th is going to be for people who want to support their colleagues, not a training of trainers, but no, I want to support colleagues and come up with activities to help them take care of themselves. And then October 9th is our fall instructional conference. So finally, I'd like to thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. I'd also like to thank you for all that you do. I know that you're active in your local organizations, and some people like Gail are active at national organizations, making the world a better place. I'd also like to have you remember that NEA New Hampshire is here to support you and your work with students. So if there's anything we can do for you in your role, please let us know. And if there's anything else you need me to address, could you put it in the chat room or the chat function, and I would be glad to address it.
Thank you, Irv, and thank you, George. As always, another successful webinar.
Thank you, Gail. And George, did we share the link to the evaluation?
The link to the certificate is there. I didn't get one for the evaluation. Let me look for that.
It should be it's like a 2-minute survey on how did Zoom work for you, and what do you want for future topics for more ESP workshops? We can send it out.
Yeah, if I can't find it in the next second or two, we will send it out to everyone who was online today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the day. There's still time to get some sun.
Yeah, or go water the lawn.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon. Or
Right, yeah, and Gail, think about that for the October 9th workshop.
happy to. Yeah.